Every small town in this nation has its town drunk. And I'm Banff's. My father was the town drunk before me, and his father was the town drunk before him. You might say I'm just continuing the family tradition. It's a sad day in this country when they put up the price of a working man's beverage. So he says to me, Ron, you're a school teacher. I says, yeah. He says, well, I got this letter here from Revenue Canada saying that I haven't paid taxes for years and that I've never even filed an income tax form. And I think they're kind of angry with me. I've never worked. What do you think I should do? We discussed his situation for a while, and I said, well, Bruce, why don't you just write him a letter? And he said, well, that's why I asked you over here. I thought you could maybe help me. I said, I think you'll do fine by yourself, Bruce. So he wrote a letter in my presence, to whom it may concern. And he went through the part about every small town has its drunk. And then he said, I do odd jobs at the Cascade and King Edward hotels working on the boilers. And I am paid in draft.
Beer.
Therefore, I believe my taxes have already been paid. Yours sincerely, Bruce Beatty. Sent it in. Never heard from them again. Just Italian wine you can imagine. So that summer, there's a train wreck between Banff and Canmore, and there's 3 carloads of wine from Kelowna and this Danini stuff that's in the train wreck. And the word got, it was a Saturday, and the word got around that you could take anything you could find along the railway tracks until the construction cranes arrived to repair the track. They didn't care, just, we're just going to get rid of everything anyway. So everybody was over there picking up all these cases of wine and stuff. So he had several cases of wine. And he used to say, and I saw this, he had a bunk bed. He slept in the next room. And there would be a half a bottle of Danini there under his bed. And he'd say, Ron, some people think I'm a drunk, but I know I'm not. You tell me if I'm wrong. He says, on New Year's Eve, I open a new bottle of Danini, and I drink half of it, and I put the other half under my bed, and it stays there till the next New Year's Eve, and I never touch it. And if you define a drunk as somebody who won't be tempted to take a drink out of a bottle that they know is under their bed every night for 1 year, then, well, I just don't think I'm a drunk.
Wonderful reasoning. Wonderful reasoning. Just.
Whenever I had to pay rent, Bruce would say to me, Ron, come and meet me at the office. We've got to talk about your monthly rent. And I'd say, okay, Bruce, what time would you like me to meet you? Oh, office hours, 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. You know where I'll be. So, one Saturday afternoon, I'm back in the old basement where he lives and I lived. And Bruce he always wore the dirtiest CPR coveralls you could imagine. And there were 2 young guys from Ontario that were on their way home. And they thought that the best souvenir they could get of Banff would be to try to buy a pair of coveralls off Bruce. So this was sort of how the negotiation went. They came by and chatted here and there, and asked Bruce if he'd consider selling his uniform. He said, well, he'd consider it, but it was certainly a very valuable thing to him and would probably cost him a bit. So they negotiated for a while, and I think they offered him $25. And Bruce said, oh, no, that's not nearly enough. 75 at least. And they said, Bruce, will you buy a new pair for $30? He said, well, of course you could. But it's going to take you 5 years to get them this dirty. So that's the premium.
When was I in Banff? 70. It was the 25th anniversary. We always called this the Great Train Robbery. He told this story. I went home and wrote it down, and it went on for about 2.5 hours. As long as we were buying beer, he had additions to this story, such as,
well, I couldn't be a steam locomotive engineer in Canada, but they had a railway in the United States still, so I went down to Great Falls and applied to get on the Great Northern. Didn't sound good, though, when he picked up the phone and phoned the superintendent in the western section of the Canadian Pacific Railway and called him by a first name and said, you know a young man named Bruce Beatty? So I just got up and left at that point.
like one time when I first met him, he had a brown paper bag, and the tables are 4. And he'd keep peeking in the bag. Sit there. Finally, someone would come over. Like, you always got the new tourists in town to say, go talk to Bruce. He always wears railway overalls and his cap and no teeth. And if you tell him, you go talk to that guy and just buy the beer, and you'll get the education of your life. So he keeps looking in the brown bag, and somebody will come over and say, Bruce, what's in the bag?
None of your business. Leave me alone. A little while later, oh, come on, Bruce, what's in the bag? Nothing in the bag. Leave me alone. Well, sit down, buy a couple of beers, and talk. So, talk until, as long as you're buying the beer, let's talk. And then he'd say, now, while I make my bladder gladder, maybe you can refresh our table. It looks a little low. And then he'd go to the washroom. Beer would come, more stories. And then after the last round was called and the last beer was bought, he'd say, well, you've been pretty curious about what's in the bag, so I'll show you. It's what I told you. Nothing.
Or you did that one too. Oh. My first year in Banff, it's just about Christmas time, so I'm going to go home for Christmas. And so I go down to the Cascade Tavern the night that I'm going to leave. And of course Bruce is there at his usual place, and the place is hopping. And Bruce lets it be known that he's going to make a Christmas toast. And this, over a period of an hour, goes through the whole bar that Bruce is going to give a toast. So he finally goes up to the front, and the whole place goes totally quiet. And there's 2 guys that own the bar and have owned it maybe the last 6-7 years, and I think it's Harry and John. So Harry's working, they're short-staffed, and he's working the bar that night. And so Bruce gets up, and he says,
Harry, you've been the manager of this bar now for about the last 7 years, I think, and I've had a drink in your bar every day you've been open. And I sure do appreciate your generosity that after 7 years, Christmas spirit and all, You have decided that you will give me 2 free draft. 2 gratis draft. After 7 years. Your generosity overwhelms me. But Harry, they're both below the line.